In the year 3, forecast world economic growth percentage is at 1.6. This is because other places have showed that they're not able to grow as faster now. So therefore, economic growth will be at 1.6%. And the consumer confidence index in Econland is 101. In the year 3, to recap, before my original interest rate was at 2.5%. My original income tax rate was at 24%. My original corporation tax rate was at 28%, and my original government spending was at 31 billion. I want my I will only be changing two things in this year. I'll only be decreasing corporate tax rate and increasing government spending. Interest rate will remain the same. Why keep it the same? Is because I feel that increasing interest rate will only decrease aggregate demand since there'll be less borrowing. And by decreasing the interest rate, I have a feeling that since I use the multiplier told me that if I was to decrease in interest rate, this would be this would cause too much money supply into the government. Too much money supply in the government would lead to too much spend, too much consumption, and maybe too much consumption might might lead to an increased inflation, leading and this inflation might increase just above 3, and that is something I'll try to avoid. I will still be using the expansionary OMO policy, since the central banks will be issuing cash to the banks, and the banks will be buying bonds, therefore using expansionary. I chose to keep it like this since I believe that still keeping it expansionary, this is still stimulating the economy. And slowly, since there's still money supply in the economy, so they're still spending for consumption. Therefore, aggregate demand will not decrease. It will stay. It will maybe increase still by slightly, but not increase too much, which will lead to too much increase in inflation, which would later on increase to hyperinflation. And hyperinflation is a price level. The price level increases to high massive spiral distribution in economic activity. I will not be changing income tax because I believe that since I haven't changed in the last 2 years, I feel there's no need for me to change income tax. There's no need for me to increase it or decrease it, because I feel that income tax is a good source for where the government's getting its revenue, and when it's getting its revenue, it's able to spend. So I feel that if I'm to keep income tax, I feel keeping it at 24% is a reasonable choice to make. Well, one thing I will change, although, will be the corporate tax rate. I will be decreasing corporate tax rate by 2%. I want to decrease corporate tax since I believe that the economic growth, since economic forecast world economic growth is at 1.6, by decreasing corporate tax, this will lead to more production of goods and services from corporations in the country. Therefore, I would be able to later on these goods and services will later on be sold to other places in the world. Therefore, the money received from the selling of these products would later on be counted in the GDP. Therefore, the real GDP growth would be at a good would still real GDP growth will still be above 2.4%. Therefore, GDP growth line will remain the same and will keep increasing and not decreasing. So GDP growth would still remain between 2.9% and 2.8%. Hopefully, I would like to see GDP growth go to above 3%. Government expenditure I will increase by 1 billion. I believe that increasing by 1 billion, government expenditure will provide more infrastructures, will provide more health, and will provide more privatization procedures. It will keep economy at a good level, since in other parts of the world, economy will not be going at a steady level. Having government expenditure increase by 1 billion, this will also decrease unemployment, keeping unemployment keeping unemployment below 5%. That is the ultimate goal. The goal is again to keep goals again to keep are that inflation should be below 3%, the unemployment below 5%, GDP growth above 2.5%, and deficit below 3%. The deficit I have always had in the last 2 years a deficit, although I have witnessed that the deficit has slowly been shrinking. Since at the start, before year one, the budget deficit was at 3%, while now before the year three start, budget deficit is is at 1.6%. Therefore, budget deficit is very very low. So if I'm this luckily in year three, I hope that if budget deficit is to remain below 3%, means I can put a little bit of government expenditure, and hopefully with this government expenditure, I'm not going to increase too much inflation, and I will be focalizing myself on more on decreasing unemployment, since unemployment is always quite low, and it's always at 4.7%. I feel that if unemployment rate is at 4.7, if unemployment rate is always at 4.7%, this causes that it's quite risky because at 4.7% it's very very close to 5%. So one little factor could lead to unemployment going over 5%. I hope to achieve these goals by changing corporate tax rate to 26% and government spending to 32 billion.